Caw. Two men. One named Rich. That's me.
This is Jermaine. Just got off the toilet.
He's a foul man. This is the X's and O's of life.
Huh?
It's still really, really silly.
No, I like it. I like it.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't match anything that we do on the interview part of it, but maybe that's its appeal. I don't know. So, this is kind of my main event here. I have been kind of on cloud 9 since I reached out to Justin here. And he is from a podcast that I've listened to for, oh God, I've probably been subbed for like 2, 3. I don't know, man. COVID messed up my whole timing. All I know is I've listened to every single thing he's put out, and that's why my wife doesn't like you, because she's like, dude, you got to stop listening to this stuff because it's bad for you. It's like, it's fine, don't worry about it. You're not gonna do anything bad to you, probably. But this is Justin from Obscura. He also does Black Label. He also does Disaster, and they are all, well, the first two are true crimey. Disaster is more so, I don't know, do you call it like redemption-esque stories, kind of, you know? I don't know. It's kind of hard to really put that into a box. Miniature podcast, you can tell me, but definitely a big fan here, and reached out to him and was super surprised he responded. And yeah, I'm gonna do my best to keep it to an hour, but we'll see.
Well, I'm happy to be on. Like we were talking about before we actually got on here, I don't usually do a lot of hot mic podcasts, and a lot of times it's just because I miss the offers or I don't really trust local news these days. So
yeah, I'm just a goofy guy in Pittsburgh sitting in this dining room. So
I'm curious. You said you've been listening to a couple years. What was the episode that caught your attention? That's always something I'm curious about. Like, what was the one where you're like, what the heck is this?
I don't even remember what really brought me to the table. Yeah, I don't want to sit here and lie to you at all. I can't. I don't want to make anything up. For whatever reason, it came across my algorithm, and maybe it was the logo that kind of, got my attention. But I'm pretty sure I started at episode 1. That's at least the safe answer, because I'm kind of that type of person where it may not be episodic in the sense of it going, you didn't listen to number 2, you don't know what's going to happen in number 5. No, but I like to treat it like a book. So it would more than likely be the first one. And then I got into all the Black Labels, which, once again, wife doesn't like you, but there is something. It's like a car crash, right? Not your podcast, but it's the idea of it is kind of a car crash. You don't want to look, but you have to, because there's like that morbid curiosity of, I wonder what happened. I don't want anyone to be injured, but if I saw an arm, oh, gross, but also wow. Then I heard kind of what you do for folks. Like, you tell the story and your compassion, and you let your emotion out too, right? You don't just keep it PC, I guess. You're like, no, this you don't overtly say these people are awful, but you kind of have to be a little dense to not hear the inflection and the inferring of it.
Yeah. When I first started the podcast, there was only a handful of podcasts doing true crime at the time. Like we're talking about maybe like 5 or 6. I
Wow.
can't. And you know, this was going on a decade ago at this point. And the earliest episodes you hear on there are actually not the original published date. I actually went through and recreated those because my voice kind of started to change through the years. You know, you get older. So people would listen to the oldest episodes and they'd hear the way I used to sound and then kind of get into the newer ones. And, you know, here I am sounding gruffer and older or whatever.
I dig your voice so much, man.
I appreciate it.
It is perfect for what you do.
And so I remember at the time, you know, I didn't really have like a lot of direction as far as like what I should be doing. But what I did know is that a lot of the true crime TV shows were off the air at the time. Forensic Files had been taken off the air, and a lot of them, if you look now, there's Forensic Files 2, and that's because they took down the first show. They weren't doing future seasons, and that's sort of where like true crime podcasts came in to sort of fill that gap. It was like TV had neglected true crime there for a bit. And what's interesting though is that throughout the years, you know, as the true crime genre has like expanded, I think what's happened is that there's sort of like quote unquote true crime fans. What they can sort of unintentionally do is glorify the serial killers, you know. And that's something I've always tried to stay away from doing. I've always tried to basically, you know, when possible, make these guys look terrible, make them look like goofs, make them, you know, and try
Not
to.
too hard.
Yeah. Well, you would think that, but then you listen to some podcasts and they've sort of built these guys up like sort of icons. And
Mhm.
that's where I guess my philosophy differs from some.
And that was going to sort of be kind of the question. It's what makes, in your eyes, makes you different. And I would double down on that. I'll die on that hill. Absolutely. And I think that's why I respect what you do so much, because you don't do the, well, I mean, this guy's body count is, you're like, no, fuck this guy's body count. Like, we don't want it. That's not a flex. Like, let's talk about, you know, what happened to the family and the residual effects of, well, you murdered this dad's daughter. What does this dad have to say? Like, because that is the important. I don't know if that is the important part. I mean, I don't know. There isn't really necessarily lessons to be learned from the pod unless you're like morally ambiguous and are debating on doing things. Then fine, I guess don't do those. But yeah, I would say that absolutely puts you head and shoulders over the crowd.
Yeah, and as far as like talking about what to learn from the pod or anything like that, one of the things I try to do as well is, as far as opinionated things, I always try to stay objective. And what's funny though is, in staying objective and sort of excluding myself from giving opinions on anything political or whatever that comes up in an episode, people will sort of cast their ideas or opinion on me. And so I'll get like angry messages where they're either like, oh, you know, you're a libtard, or you're a chud, or, you know, whatever. And it's people from both sides sort of casting their aspersions on me, when I refrained from doing that. You know, I refrained from even introducing, you know, because personally for me, I've never been big into listening to like a true crime podcast and then they get away from the case and start talking about like politics or something for 20 minutes. That's never been my thing.
Yeah, well, you give society an inch, it'll take a mile. It's kind of that thing. People usually have an agenda and they want to push it. And me, I'm not political. I don't give a shit either way. You know, I don't believe in the idea that whatever your, you know, political sidedness doesn't have to dictate who you are as a person. Just, okay, it's your views. Okay, no worries.
Yeah, and that's kind of how, like, for me personally, like, I would be happy to talk to anyone about whatever they wanted to talk about as far as politics goes, over a beer and in person, right?
I remember you saying that a few episodes back. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. And it's something I have to bring up every now and again because you just get so many emails of people making assumptions. And I've made it pretty clear, hey, I've kept that stuff out and intentionally because when you bring it in, then you've pissed off half the audience.
Yep, absolutely, man. And this is a business of numbers kind of rule this thing. If you're pissing off half these people, then that means half the people might not watch your next episode, which obviously can affect your bottom line. But also, why would you want to ostracize? Not you, but like why would you want to purposefully ostracize an audience and eliminate viewership? It's hard enough to get people to watch you with the convoluted, amount of podcasts out there. So once you start getting people to latch onto you, don't piss them off. But people are people, man. You know that.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm curious,
Yeah.
so I know you've been doing this for about a year. What kind of release schedule have you looked at? Like as far as like do you release bi-weekly, by month? Like how does that work out?
Yeah. So, funny enough, we actually have 3 podcasts.
Oh wow.
I have the regular X's and O's of life. That's kind of me and Jermaine, the fellow on the intro. We now have a set schedule of Sundays at 7. The interviews is whenever they pop up, and the other one is a fantasy football based one, and that obviously is during the season. But we've went through many changes. We used to do just a recording at 10:30 at night on a Wednesday, and then we tried to do the live streaming. I'm like, oh yeah, wait, no one cares. No one cares enough to stay up at 10:30 till 12 on a work day. Sorry, doesn't make sense. So we're pretty stringent now about Sundays at 7. Obviously, last Sunday was not going to happen because Easter, but yeah, I try to stay very staunch in when we do it. Obviously, the interviews you can't really schedule them until they come up, but the show itself once a week.
Yeah, yeah. I only asked that because I was looking at your YouTube channel and I could tell for a year you've got quite a lot of content out. And sort of maintaining that weekly schedule. I don't think some people can realize like how much of a grind that can be sometimes.
It's funny because how we do it is we just we shoot from the hip. We don't talk all week. We don't talk about anything. I'll come up with a subject maybe the day before or something like that. Send him a text. All right, hey bub, here's what we're gonna do. It's like, all right, cool, let's do it, and we'll just talk about it live on air. There's a really kind of unfiltered, unformatted thing, and I think that's one of the biggest things why I really enjoy what I'm doing because it's not robotic, it's not just forced. I think that's what kind of keeps me in business, I guess, for lack of a better term. Yeah.
Yeah, no. Okay, so for example, I get asked a lot, just comparatively to what you're saying. I get asked a lot, people will be like, well, what kind of true crime do you listen or watch or read? And people are often shocked when I say I don't,
It makes sense. Why would you? Would you
that
work?
Well, and the other thing is too, beyond that, first off, yes, it would feel like work. But comparing to what you were saying though, is that it keeps it fresh and untainted. Excuse me.
No, you're fine.
Untainted by other people's work.
Right.
I apologize.
You're good. We are far from professional here. It's all good.
And if I was to listen to a bunch of podcasts, instead of going into and writing my own content raw, it would immediately be influenced by other people's work. And so sort of you guys going into these ideas unplanned, that's what keeps it natural. I guess that's the point.
Yes, exactly. And I think, if you were to ask me what differentiates, that's a difficult word to say, me from other, whatever you would even consider the podcast that I do, I think it is the organic nature of it. I hate super formatted things. when it comes to like I call it a variety show or whatever you want to call it, it just seems forced, like almost like a work seminar. Nobody wants to listen to that.
Yeah, I had a friend in podcasting for years, since like the early days of the podcast. I want to say either end of 2016 or beginning of 2017. Her name was Kate, and she started with the idea of being a true crime podcast because she had work in criminal psychology. But she, for her personally, she found more entertainment or more enjoyment in creating a podcast by keeping sort of the avenues open in terms of what she could cover. She was a huge influence on me early on in terms of guidance. I remember early I would do unsolved crimes, and those episodes are actually down because I had a conversation with her, and she said something along the lines of, "You really need to choose, what you're going to be as a true crime podcast. Are you going to be hunting leads, or are you going to be pouring into case files and creating a narrative? And you sort of should pick a side, choose a side." And I did. And yeah, she recently actually died after hundreds of episodes released. But I just kind of wanted to shout her out because she was a big influence on sort of the direction I took early on.
I'm sorry to hear that, man. That's awful.
Yeah. She struggled with health issues, and sort of the thing that haunts me is we had always talked about like meeting up one day, and it's just one of those things where, for example, when you work on a podcast, you're just busy week to week, and it just never happened after years, years and years.
Yeah, it's tough. Like when you got the regrets there, because it really does give you that kind of just, I don't know, retrospective look of like, God, man, life is super short, and you just kind of reevaluate the priorities. It's like, yeah, man, I had a weekend free. I could have done it. It's just,
Yeah, no, there's a few times I've went and I've looked at our old conversations, and like literally the last one that we had, we were talking about, me getting over to Salem, eventually. And yeah, it's just, it's one of those things where you keep tucking it away, and then just like that, it's too late.
funny enough, the wife has actually taken me to Boston for my birthday, so we're actually going to be popping over to Salem. So,
Oh, you plan on getting to Irish bar fight?
maybe take a gander. No,
I always think of UFC president Dana White.
Yeah.
I guess he went and popped off in like a Boston Irish bar one time, and they punched him in the ear, and woke
know
up.
your audience, man. Know your audience.
Yeah,
It's like,
so, yeah.
just because you own an NFL team does not mean you can catch a ball. Just saying. There you go, Dana. So, I guess one of the big burning questions I have here, and let me just kind of ask you here: Are you strict on the hour, or you got wiggle room?
No, man, I have wiggle room.
I
just dropped something yesterday.
Yeah, that was fucking sad, man. Like, anyway, that's generally how I feel the majority of the time after I listen to an episode. I'm like, let me go hug my puppy, and like, it's just, what made you get into this?
Yeah, that's something I actually reflect on a lot, and I think it's a few things. So just the simple part is that, and I'll get into the more complex stuff, but to start, I grew up watching Rescue 911.
Me too.
Yeah, that was an
Nice.
awesome show. And then Unsolved Mysteries.
Yes.
Those two in particular
My
were
spirit animal.
huge for me. And there's this oh man, I'm gonna butcher her name. There was an episode in particular that haunted me as a kid. It's like Antoinette Candido or something. It's this little girl that went missing, and they played like her 911 call. That just always stuck with me, and sort of the haunting feeling of that call being played, and then the uncertainty and the sort of low synth music at the time. That's something I always wanted to try to capture in obscura episodes. And so yeah, that was definitely a huge influence. Then there was the aspect that I personally wasn't very pleased by the state of true crime around when I started this podcast. There was a handful of true crime podcasts. The very first one that doesn't get its credit because there's a few people that claim that they're the first true crime podcast, but it was actually in my mind, because I can't think of anything that came before him, a man named Dan Zupansky. Now, Dan Zupansky, for many years, had the worst audio quality you could possibly imagine. If you're thinking how bad it is, like, you can just imagine it's worse. It sounded like it was recorded in the 1970s. But I loved that. I actually loved it. There was something about the vibe. It felt like the hearing true crime where it's coming out with audio that sounds like it was recorded on a toaster. It gives it this archaic, strange vibe, right?
Okay. A little ambiance. I like it.
Yeah. And so, he was definitely an early influence. And then, and I don't mean this to be awkward or anything, but I think a lot of the true crime creators that you talk to, they usually have a history of childhood abuse.
Okay.
And, not to make it awkward or whatever, but that probably has a good hand of why I would be drawn to sort of morbid interests, because
Right.
every true crime creator I've ever personally spoken to all has that in their history. So clearly there's something going on there.
I mean, that makes perfect sense. You're chasing your monster, right? And you want to see other monsters brought to justice, or things kind of around that, I guess, that idea. That makes absolute sense.
Yeah, and I think as far as that goes, true crime can get a bad rap, especially among people like Redditors or whatever. But so you look at the serial killer statistics in the 80s when they absolutely peaked, right? And then you look at the dip they took when people became more socially aware, right? Less likely to hop into a random car.
I see where you're going for here.
I think a lot of that is owed to those early 90s, Rescue 911, Unsolved Mysteries, America's Most Wanted. Without those shows, I don't think that awareness enters the zeitgeist.
No, that's an insane point, man. Holy shit. Yeah. I mean, all you would get is the notification of, oh, well, Timmy got abducted in the van on the 6 a.m. news. But
Yeah.
wow, that's crazy. Wow, I never even thought of that. Oof. Real quick, I just want to ask you this here too, because it's my personal. It's like a personal question, and you can answer it however you need to answer that. I don't know how PC we need to be here. Generally speaking, when I listen and there are 911 calls, why does it sound like the operator is just a dick for the most part throughout the whole call? They're just a dick.
Yeah, no, I've thought about that a lot. I think it's probably
so much.
I think that there's a couple reasons. One, I think that for them, it's like after a while, it's like any other job, and they're like frustrated at the way that like a fast food worker would be with a customer.
Yeah.
I think two, probably for legal reasons, there's like a certain way, like a certain number of questions and information that they have to, basically fit in. And that's why you'll see them be so like aggressive with like, no, I need your address. Like, no, I need your, and so I think sometimes that's the case. And then there are other cases like, I think it was like Black Label Flood, where
Exactly what I was going to think about. That lady that was just almost making fun of that poor lady that was freaking out in the car.
that lady had a day left of her job
Yeah.
as an operator, and I think
Yeah.
she just didn't care.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Which is just like, it gives me goosebumps on how mad that made me, because that was the reason I asked, because that was the first thing that I came to. I'm like, oh, this fucking bitch! I swear to God, like, this lady is. I guess in my head, because I'm not a garbage person, I couldn't imagine. I do tech support for work, right? And I get a lot of people that are. You would think that their house is crumbling because things are broken, and you have to kind of treat them with kid gloves and know the audience and understand what's going on. But yeah, I have to get pertinent information from them as well, and obviously not by any stretch of the imagination are these two things correlated in a principle standpoint, but the operational part of it is kind of there. You get the pertinent information, and then you listen and you hear what they're saying and you respond accordingly. A lot of these times, yeah, they get the information, but you can almost feel like there's like a snicker or almost like a condescending atmosphere with that operator, that it's almost like, well, sorry, you called me on my day off. It's like this person is in dire straits. Yeah, I get you get a lot of bad calls, a lot of fake calls, a lot of unnecessary calls, but dude, you're right. At that point, right then, you were that person's potential angel. So I don't know. That's my personal 2 cents on it.
yeah, and I have a very specific story that relates to that.
Shoot.
I worked as a seasonal tech support for a large photo book company, and there was a lot of hats that you had to wear, and most of it had to do with their app and like getting people to power cycle their internet, like the usual stuff.
Yeah.
But what they could also ask you, and this would absolutely murder your time, is they would ask for help building a photo book. And the problem is there was no nuance to the system. So if somebody needed help building a photo book, your time is just getting destroyed for that day, right? And nobody, like, the system doesn't care, right? And I remember a woman asked me for help with a photo book, and obviously I'm not going to use any names or anything. And at first I felt a lot of internal frustration, right? Like just knee jerk, no consideration for what she really needed, but just sort of like a knee jerk, like, wow, this is going to ruin my time type of thing. But then it's always stuck with me because through working with her, I had found out that her child had died from cancer, and that this photo book was a part of a gift to her husband to sort of like rekindle their marriage. And I remember I just felt like such trash for like initially just like, sort of hating this person, right, for wasting my time. And yeah, it goes to what you're saying, like as far as like tech support or anything, that these are actual people on the other line.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful, well, not a beautiful story in the sense of like what the reason behind it, but it shows that, one, you were self-aware enough to realize, yeah, I may have flew off the handle internally in my head, but it almost gives you pause now, if you were still doing said job, to like, okay, this may be a stupid question to me, but this person doesn't know how this operates, and I don't know her end game or his end game or whatever. This could be a small cog in a much larger wheel that could be, X, Y, Z. But yeah, I that's awesome.
Kind of to what you're saying too. So a lot of times when I cover these cases, the first third of an episode will often be covering the killer's backstory, right?
Right.
Then the middle section will often be what they did. And then the last third is like investigation, and then often either the death penalty or the life sentence, right? But one of the things I try to do as far as like nuance, as far as covering the case, even though I don't have a ton of sympathy for killers, when I cover that first third of like their background, if you heard just that first third, you might think that it's the story of any other person. And so I do try to have like a certain level of empathy of like where they came from, who they were, because there is I do have empathy for the fact that the majority of them suffered pretty severe abuse almost in every occasion, you know.
I'll tell you a good story when you're done here.
Oh no, go right ahead.
No, finish your thought. I gotta. It's actually from one of the interviews I did that blew my mind. So absolutely, finish your thought, please.
Oh no, the thought was finished. Go right ahead.
Oh, all right, fair enough. So, I'll not to make it weird as you said there, but I interviewed a lady that was a sex therapist, and her forte was pedophiles. And I don't think anybody here, unless they want to raise their hand, likes pedophiles. The natural instinct is you're terrible, awful people, yada, 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 so on and so forth. What this lady actually did, and I would say I'm a pretty, fart smella or smart fella, whichever one. She humanized these people, and she explained to me that 95% of these people hate who they are. They despise themselves. They want to kill themselves on a regular basis, but there is some chemical imbalance and not medical, but it's easier to saying they're pretty fucked up. And they hate that they have this society. They hate that they see a kid and that arouses. And I never in my 37, fuck, I don't know how old I am. I think I'm 37, 38. I don't know, somewhere there. I'm almost dead. Years of life, never thought that someone would be able to humanize that person, because you forget that there's a person behind that action. It was just absolutely crazy having that happen. I don't know.
Yeah, I cover a lot of different types of guys, and like
Yep.
as far as I'm concerned, the big thing I care about is once they sort of cross that line,
Yeah.
once they sort of cross that like line where it's like, I don't know that you can sort of forgive what they just did there.
Oh yeah, absolutely not.
Now there is nuance though, right? There was a case I did pretty recently where a guy came in and confessed off of a murder he had committed 15 years previous. And you would think it would be hard to feel empathy for someone like that, but he was so genuinely tortured.
Oh yeah. You
know
I-
the case?
I was remembering here. Hold on, are you done though? Uh-huh. Go ahead.
He was so genuinely tortured by what he had done that by the time I had finished working on the episode, I had to go and rework things a little, because I, maybe for the first time since I had started the show, had a feeling like, man, this guy, who killed someone in a sort of drug-addled rage or whatever, he's genuinely remorseful, and maybe the
Yes.
slim 15-year sentence he was given makes sense in this case,
No, it's absolute. Was it the I don't William Blodgett?
Yes, that's it.
That was it. Yeah. Okay.
I think it was in New Mexico.
Not sure. It doesn't. I would have to look at it. But yeah, no, absolutely. And there are those weird stories that come out that it's like it's like, I wouldn't say it's like having a disease, but I'm a diabetic, right? I don't introduce myself as, oh, hey, I'm diabetic. Like, no, I'm rich. Like, I think with these criminals, now obviously the pedophiles are fucking terrible people. I get it. non-forgivable things, but they are still people, and something led them to that. And I guess just the interesting part to me, still not forgivable, but the interesting part was it almost made me feel good that they hate themselves. That sounds weird. It feels weird to say, but it made me feel better that they hate what they do.
Yeah, yeah, no, because I mean, at the end of the day, if they were like, "Yeah, this is awesome," that's when you got to really watch out for them, right? I mean,
Yeah,
and so
fair.
yeah, there should be a space where they can go and seek treatment. Because if you discourage that, right, then there's no exit.
Yeah.
There's no exit for them as far as dealing with it. And so yeah, no, I do think as far as kind of working with them and seeking therapy, that should be something more advertised as an option to people who are afflicted, for sure.
Yeah, because it's not a normal thing to. Obviously, it's a choice, but there is something there that's causing those thoughts to happen. It's not a natural thought.
Well, I would even go as far as to say that it's not even necessarily a choice for them, and that's where it's tragic, right? Like,
Right.
somebody gets severely abused, as a kid, and then that sort of, becomes a part of their psyche.
Right.
They
It's
don't
normal.
really, yeah, yeah, that becomes part of their psyche, what's fine to them or whatever. That is a tragedy. The part though where you have to like take a step back is that you can feel empathy for someone like that, but at the same time you also have to like recognize reality, right? And if somebody is afflicted in that way, you wouldn't necessarily want them to be a babysitter or a teacher, or you know there are sort of lines in society that we have to draw on the ground.
Yeah, and it's always scary because usually they don't get caught till they get caught, and after that they've already infiltrated some, I guess, children build, career or something that gives them very easy access, and it's just you're almost terrified to know how many things aren't known compared to what is known. That's just it's gross.
Yeah, and there's subjects I've covered, like I've talked about the SFWA, and there's sort of,
Yeah, that was the first time I ever heard you really get like fuck these guys kind of fired up.
well, the reason why, and this is one of the few times I've really gone out of my way to interject, is because they've gotten away with it for like scot free. Like these guys are all still walking around, right? So if I am going to take a moment to be like, yeah, fuck these guys, basically, it
You
is
want to
going
tell
to be,
folks who that is, by the way, just so people are kind of up in the up?
yeah. So there's a lot of people connected to the science fiction writers of America and their history, and who are either open pedophiles that support organizations like NAMBLA. Like, it sounds like I'm joking, but it's very true. Who are even teaching in schools right now, or are rotting in there. There are the very select few that are rotting in prison or dead. That at the very least had their names smeared. And I have interviewed victims of these people. I've interacted with them. When I first announced that I was going to cover the SFWA, they immediately flooded my Twitter, and even temporarily, I believe, got my Twitter banned for like 3 months by mass reporting my posts.
Well, that's it is amazing the leaps and bounds people will try to go through to make their creepy ass stuff normalized.
Yeah, and that's one. So I spoke with someone named Moira Grayland, and she had two very famous science fiction author parents, including Marion Zimmer Bradley, who still gets taught in schools. And the part that, as far as spreading awareness goes, that's difficult is it sounds so conspiracy brained to even talk about. Like, hey, there's all these there are these connected science fiction writers that protect each other and have like a legal fund, and they will make your life hell if you draw attention to what they've been up to. It sounds tinfoil hat. And that was one of the things I tried to express in the episode, that no, this is true crime. It's not a conspiracy.
And once again, not to toot your horn here, but yeah, anytime there has been some kind of I guess caveat or variable to the conventional episodic pod that you run, you've always been very good about laying everything out there, that there isn't any reading between the lines. What I'm saying is gospel here, so XYZ, there you go. So
One
I
of
think
the subjects that I got told through emails several times is I was one of the first people to talk about the monkey hate rings that were like on YouTube and things of that nature, like the rings of people involved in creating monkey hate playlists and things like that. I was told over and over again that it was just a conspiracy theory. Well, just the other day, the ringleader of one of those communities was arrested. So
good.
Yeah. But when you say it out loud,
the animal ones are the hardest for me to listen to. I'm just like, oh, dude, I can't.
Yeah, from time to time, I do like to cover the animal cases, and I know that it's a challenge for people.
Yeah.
But I feel like
you give a disclaimer out for, so anyone that listens, he does have a disclaimer out for those episodes.
Yeah, and the thing is, though, what happens though is it creates a situation where those cases don't get coverage, and those type of crimes don't get a spotlight on. So people are kind of afraid to touch them, because of the understandable natural reaction people have to animal-related true crime.
Yeah. So let's talk about the two differences here. So you have Obscura, and then you have Black Label. So you wouldn't mind explain the difference between the two and kind of what made you want to kind of do let's call it a spinoff, essentially.
Yeah, so it wasn't actually planned. What happened is I was chugging along and creating true crime podcasts. And early on, I covered a case about this gentleman named Nick Stautzenberger. And Nick Stautzenberger had sort of an obsession with fecal matter.
Yep.
And I'll just keep it that way.
Yep.
And people were so upset by the episode. I mean, I was getting emails where people were like, I had to pull over the car because I felt like I was going to throw up, type thing. And that's when I realized, wow, I need a degree of separation here, right? And so that right there is what led to me launching Black Label of, hey, it is what it says on the tin. This is, and there's no real basically at the I start each month deciding which cases I'm going to cover, and the one I consider to be sort of the most graphic is the one that I will leave to Black Label. And that's basically the main separation right there.
So I have so many questions. It's actually frustrating that I didn't write anything down because I'm doing it on the fly. But why break? Well, don't change if it ain't broken, type of thing. But god damn. Okay. What? Yeah, let's go with this. What was the hardest episode for you to either research and record, or both, or if it's two different ones, you can kind of go that way? But just kind of curious what really kind of got you.
Yeah, no, if there's any episode that basically broke me, is I covered a girl named Caitlin Nicole Davis. And Caitlin Nicole Davis was someone that was involved in live streaming. She was about she was 12 years old, and she had a very broken home. Her stepdad was sexually molesting her, and her mother was beating her, and also didn't care that the stepdad was doing those things because her real mom basically needed the money from the stepfather. And then she would go online to these live streams, and all the viewers in her chat would basically try to sexually exploit her and try to get her to do that kind of stuff. And I watched about 100 hours worth of her streams.
Jesus, man, really?
Yeah,
Wow.
just pouring through, reading the chats, everything she sort of went through. And the episode sort of concludes with her live stream hanging herself. And as she's hanging herself, if you read the chat, during the original video, it's all people telling her to get her tits out and things like that. And it gave me such a dark view of humanity during that period that for the first time, that was the first time I actually hired writers for a while to take a break from sort of living in that world. And so for a little bit there during that season, the next season, I didn't write like a certain number of Black Label episodes. I had a writer handling that, and I would just record and edit them because I would just close my eyes and I would see Caitlin hanging in those woods. So
Jesus, man.
I think I might have suffered a degree of PTSD.
Oh my God, absolutely. Absolutely. Like that, there is no way that you are like not unhinged a little bit to do what you do. Like, and I mean that in the most respectful way possible. Like, you have to, like, my wife is a nurse, I think. I don't know. She does things with medicine. I don't know. And she has told me stories where like, I mean, I was like, how many people have you seen die? She's like, I don't know, 17, 18. I'm like, how are you fucking normal? How is that okay? She's like, it's okay. Got the nurse brain. So, like, to be able to do this and to obviously do what you do and actually have the empathy and have the, the sympathy and just, it's everything you bring to the table from the victim side of it. Like, it has got to be such a cross to bear to kind of like, I mean, you're working at home, right? So you're able to differentiate work and home, but doing what you do, like, you shut the mic off, that does not make the thoughts go away. That's just crazy, man.
Yeah, it's one of those things where when I'm not working, like I said, when I'm not working on true crime, I'm not really engaged in true crime. And then on top of that, in general, I used to have a lot of like morbid hobbies. Those have sort of went away. And in fact,
don't glance over that there, buddy. Come on back. What were your morbid hobbies?
Oh, I mean, just a lot of different, morbid history, things like the Crusades and World War II,
okay.
and, as far as that goes, and then even just like sort of dark internet exploring, finding the weird places on the internet and forums and, but now, it's one of those things where, you dangle your feet, into the abyss, you might fall in type thing. And so to manage that, like, I stay away from that stuff when I'm not working on the podcast. And in fact, people kind of laugh when I tell them this. What I go to sleep to at night, every night, I go to sleep to old wrestling videos. Like, I have all the old VHS recordings, which I prefer, of like old 1990s WWF and things like that from when I was a kid. And it's just because I can watch it and not have a single thought in my brain. Like, just kind of like,
yes. A palate cleanser. That's wow. So, I guess to kind of fast forward here a little bit, what's your end game here with the pod? Like, what do you want that to evolve into, or?
There is no end game as far as that goes. There are a lot of podcasts, so I have a specific type of format, and for a while, what I would do is I would do basically like every other week would be obscura episodes, and then you get your black label episode.
Right.
And the way that it would work is that the episodes were longer, like, they were like 50 minutes to an hour and 10 minutes long. But recently, because people seem to be happier with it, I switched to releasing minimum one episode a week, but sometimes there will even be two. And what that's allowed me to do is cover those more obscure cases that no one's covers. That might be 26 minutes to like 35 minutes long. But the thing is, it's some 1992 Cracker Barrel case that no one's ever talked about type of thing,
Right.
And so it gives me room because, okay, and this is no slight against other podcasts, but I feel like what's happened is everyone's covering the same exact big hitters, right? The BTKs, the Ted Bundys. And in my mind, there's almost no value to covering them.
There isn't.
And so what I do is I'll do FOIA requests for, obscure cases and pull directly from the autopsy and the case file when presenting the story and the psychological background conducted by the criminal psychologist. And there's no books or TV shows or anything on some of these cases. It's like the first time people are really hearing about them since like 1988 or whenever it happened. And so me, as far as like an end game goals, it goes, it's just to do this as long as people are willing to listen to it. I've had people say like, you should expand the YouTube. And it's like, so for me personally, YouTube hates me, right? Like I use the no words.
Yeah.
And so there's only like a handful of the obscura episodes up on YouTube. And that's because I keep getting, messages of like, oh, this is limited, blah, 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 because you said murder or whatever. Or instead of saying suicide, you should have said end themselves or whatever. And so for me personally, I don't try to expand into YouTube at all. Like I keep it strictly to the podcast. People will find the YouTube and they'll be like, man, that thing's like a a desert wasteland. It's like, yeah, because I don't tell people about it, So yeah, I guess the sort of a shorter answer of your question is my goals in general have been succeeded, and it's just basically to keep on keeping on.
Nice. Well, that makes me very happy because I was very sad for a minute. I'm like, don't you hurt me. I've been hurt before, sir. Don't stop on me. I actually recently stopped doing audio only and just focused strictly on the YouTube things. I noticed I was getting 4-1 on YouTube compared to the audio. I was like, well, I'm not going to dedicate the time to doing the audio side of it, just doing that, because no one cares. But obviously someone in your predicament here where you're covering what you're covering and, having a very, real life response. Yeah, they're probably not. I mean, I can't say that I'd be as enthralled. Not that I need the word murder, but if you had to dabble on eggshells here to make sure that you're following YouTube police, it seems a little silly. I understand the rationale behind it, but I don't know. I kind of figured that's why you had the button down there where it said this isn't for kids. I don't know.
Yeah.
But color me logical, I guess.
Yeah, and no, I get it. I get why a lot of people prefer to sort of push their stuff on YouTube because, it does lead to higher viewership. But there was a YouTube channel I used to really, really like. I'm drawing a blank, but she was basically ran off YouTube once the big transition happened, and it was such a shame because she was one of the first like OGs to do it, and she covered unsolved crimes, and the list of like words that you couldn't say like begin to grow and grow and grow, and finally she had enough and sort of left. So Yeah, it's kind of a different story when you're in true crime.
I mean, there's a lot of bad words, and I get it, but once again, I'll die on this hill. There's literally a button when you upload it. It says, yes, this is for kids. No, this isn't for kids. You're like, shouldn't give you free reign to say everything you want to under the sun, but I understand they're using AI, but AI should be able to recognize what the content is and the the coinciding words that more than likely would go along with it. But I also understand, just like with anything, people will find a loophole and make it fucking creepy. So there's that. Is there anything that you won't cover?
Yeah. There's that one that I get all the time. They're like, oh, it would be perfect for Black Label. And man, speaking of YouTube, I don't even know if I can even say the case, but it's a particularly bad case from the dark web. And the thing that makes me kind of side eye at podcasts that have covered it is I don't know how they would cover it in such detail without actually seeing the video of some really just the worst stuff on earth. That's the way I would describe it. And so it's a step or two over the line of things done to a minor. And, I find it so like, I don't know. It's the one case where I'm like, no, that's the one I won't do, type of thing. And I'll get emails all the time like, oh, you should cover it. And I'm like, nah, I'm good.
I think sometimes people forget, like, yeah, this is your job. I mean, this is your full-time job, right? Like, this is what you do. Okay, that's awesome. I'm so jealous of that. Anywho, I think people forget that this is your job, but you have to do that. You have to research it. You have to watch it. You have to record that. You have to sleep at night. You have to live. You need to be able to live. I think sometimes people may think that, yeah, well, you're just reading from the script and it's fine. And like, no, man, that's yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, no. And that's the thing, is that I think that there's some people that don't realize that sort of living in it all the time, you have to manage the psychological aspect for yourself, the mental health aspect. One of my favorite true crime creators of all time, I mean, she got started back in 2012, she was called Kaylee Elise on YouTube. I don't know if that was her real name or not. But she had some of the best true crime videos you could ever see, professionally done, compassionate, empathetic, covering unsolved. But those sort of dark thoughts begin to creep inside her head. And I've heard that she started to feel, A, that she was losing it, and B, some suicidal thoughts. And so she had to end the show and walk away. And it was very abrupt. She was like at the peak of her popularity. People loved her. And she was like, sorry, guys, gotta call it quits. And I've always understood, though, like, hey, for her, that was the choice to make.
Yeah, because I mean, unfortunately, you don't want to end up being on one of those episodes. Not to be dark, but that's kind of, I don't know. I guess hearing that is one of those weirdly encouraging things in a strange way, because it's like, no, the people that are doing this, and maybe it makes sense to other people too, but people that are doing this are, they're not just getting off on murder porn over here. Like they're, let's tell the actual full story that you probably never heard. And if you did hear the story, we're going to tell you some other things about it that you probably didn't hear. And that's, I mean, what's your initial, I can't think of a verbatim here, but the initial intro to Obscura, shining a light on. Oh God, what is it? Hold on. What's the tagline there?
Shining a light on the dark.
Okay, that's it. Okay, I thought there was more to it, but generally that's what you're doing, and like less is more there. I like it.
Yeah, the idea being that the show is just a snapshot of the things that happen in real life, the darker things, and that's it. Like I've tried to, for the most part, keep things absolutely objective, and if people want to sort of read into it, that's their choice. But in general, it's just a snapshot of things that happen, and sometimes I'll even say in an episode, before something really bad happens, I'll be like, "Hey, now's your chance to hit that fast forward button." Because I know the stuff that upsets people, I've gotten a good, idea of it. But the majority of it comes, and that's the other thing too. This is a pet peeve of mine. I'll get messages saying that I put words in people's mouths, and it's like, no, just even if I don't necessarily say it at the time, the majority of these things come from case files, interrogations. These are words that were brought up and used. One of the examples is I covered serial killer Oba Chandler, and some of his surviving victims actually spoke at his trial and gave direct quotes of what was said between the two. So in the episode, when I sort of staged that scene, I use those quotes. That's one of those ones to this day, I get people saying that I put words in the victims' mouths.
Well, you start trusting the internet and the people on it, then, I got swampland to sell you in Florida. It's one of those weird things.
Now, I'm curious. I actually have a question for you before you get to your next one.
Yeah.
Are you more of a source audio guy, or are you more of a narrative structure guy?
The really dark part of me enjoys the source, because it's just, you don't want to hear what actually is happening, but you kind of still do. You sounds so kiss assy, but the way you do it though, just with your kind of abrupt, just very, it's not monotone, that's not what it's meant to sound like, but you're very level speak when you're talking about it. It's just like a perfect mesh on it. But gun to my head, I would say probably source.
Yeah, I was just curious because there's been kind of like a civil war recently.
Really?
Yeah. I've noticed because I did a few in a row that were primarily narrative, because I had some people saying, "Hey, you haven't done narrative episodes in a while," and so I did a few.
It's fucked up. That's why. Give me a break.
And I like doing, I do like doing both. But what happens often is that, so it's kind of like a 50-50 split. When I do one episode, the other half are like, "Hey, why wasn't it, the source or audio one?" Or, so I'm always curious what people prefer between the two.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be source. I mean, I told you, there was a day where I sat down and listened to 18 straight hours of Black Label, and
Oh my God.
Yeah. I was legitimately sad for like 3 fucking days past. Like I was like, and that's when the wife was like, "Dude, you can't do this anymore. I don't want you to do this." I was like, "Shut up, woman. It's okay." And like, I like lost all hope in humanity for a few days. I mean, don't hear what I'm not saying. Please check out, the back episodes. Just don't do it that way. Not good for you. Like, literally not good for your health. I will tell you the episode that I heard from, because you mentioned source, that it was probably the most difficult thing I had to go go through listening to the pod. It was I didn't want to say it. I might fucking cry. It was the cat one, and it was in the blender situation.
Oh yeah.
That
Oh, yeah.
was fucking tough, dude.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that just
That one my wife wouldn't listen to. So
yeah. I got 5 cats and a pup and a puppy, so I'm just like, oh my god, come here, babies, come here, daddy got you.
usually when someone tells me they have a hard time, it's often the animal ones, be it that one or the one where I cover the animal crush industry.
Yeah, fuck me. Oh Christ.
And or it's the one I did on the porn industry. That one tends to bother people a lot. It's usually one or the other.
Yeah. Yeah, I forgot. I think I purposely put the crush thing out of my fucking head. Thanks, guy. Appreciate it.
What's interesting about that episode, though, is as far as the coverage goes, is that, you know, being able to trace back to like where it started, you know, how it got its start in like the early tape trading days of the internet.
Oh, dude.
And what the thing is, when you're researching it, you know, you're just thinking of it in terms of letters, but then you stop and think about it, man. Like, man, these guys were so into that they were trading VHS tapes of this stuff. You know, nightmarish.
Yeah, it really. The internet's bad. People stay off the internet forever. Just forever. Just go away. No more internet. It. I gotta like. There's gotta be like dinner table conversations with you and the wife. They're just like, what the fuck did you do today?
I remember one time I was working on an episode, and the thing is, so editing is a process, you know, and sometimes you have to get the audio leveled or changed just right. And there was a specific section, I don't want to say specifically what, but I had to get the audio correct to the music that I was playing, and I kept having to play this specific section of source audio. And finally my wife is like, what the hell are you doing? Like, and because like it was just this specific section of like source audio that was pretty bad, just over and over again for like 10 minutes as I'm trying to get the editing just right, you know.
Yeah, you probably slept on the couch that night. Like, yeah, you go play with your YouTubes. I'm gonna go upstairs and cry for a while. All right. I guess I'll get you out of here on this one here, because I, honest to Christ, could talk to you for literally all the day. What was your favorite episode that you recorded in? Oh no, there's two questions. So I want to talk about disaster real quick too. What was your favorite episode that you recorded, and why?
Yeah. So as far as my favorite episodes go, and the one that I can kind of recreate forever, really, and like just continue to try to get it just right, that would probably be early on. I did. Now, keep in mind, this is before everybody was doing big hitters, and I don't really do those anymore. But I did Green River Killer, like a 3-part series, and then I did Oba Chandler. And those are two of my favorite, not for the reasons that I think are like you know, like an exciting answer, but mostly that I mean, I think I was like basically literally learning how to write the episodes during those, like, and you know, initially writing them. And since they were multiple parts each, there was so much I was learning about what I want in an episode, how I want to present an episode, how I want to end an episode. Like literally every step of those in particular were like learning moments, you know. And I know that's not like an exciting answer, but because I have such like an affinity tied towards those, I've actually remade them with time. They were remade and uploaded to the channel, and I could do it again just because, again, I sort of like I associate them with that sort of like early period. I'm not getting paid to do this, but I'm doing it out of passion type thing. It sort of reminds me of like when a musician will go back and work, like re-release like their old stuff.
Right.
Like, some of those early episodes, I just love the idea of like revisiting them. And so yeah, I have a fondness for the earliest stretch where I was doing like 80-hour weeks and not getting paid to do it, and just it was just for the passion of doing it.
No, that honestly, I'm glad your answer was that. It's kind of a cool thing where you can literally see your evolution, and you're like, no, let me go back here, fix that. I'm actually taking a semi undertaking, which I'm dragging my feet because I'm a piece of shit on. Because I wanted to do a special little episode for the year, and I'm doing everything on my own here. I wanted to take about a minute from every episode we have done for the regular show and splice it together and do it in chronological order to show you kind of like the evolution of what we have become. And it is a great idea in my head. Just the process of doing it is a bit overwhelming because I do have the regular, 40-hour deal and all that shit. But yeah, I think that's pretty cool that you're able to go back and really dive in, especially on what you do when it is a very precarious kind of position that you're in for what you do, to perfect it, essentially.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I don't think some people realize as well, is that I'll get messages where somebody will be like, well, why isn't the show like this? Or why aren't you doing it like this? And the thing that I would tell those people always is that every time I make an episode, I am trying my absolute best. You know what I mean? And so what you're getting is you're getting the best of what I can do and who I am, And trust me, if I could be everything at once, it would be so much easier. But at the end of the day, I'm going to create them the way that I'm going to create them,
Well, there's two things that can happen there. One, I recently interviewed a mafioso, so any of those people that have an issue with that, send them over here. I fucking know a guy. Two, those guys can suck a bag of dicks. That's kind of my thought on that. Because at the end of the day, and I say this jokingly on my channel all the time, where I just say like, well, I should have done this. But I'm like, you know what? It's my podcast. Go fuck yourself. It's fine. I'll do what I want. I don't understand how people can sit there and critique you on what you are doing, what time you are spending on the pod. They're not spending any money, time, any sweat equity. You are. So for someone to come into your pod and your channel and say, oh, well, you should do it like this. Well, your dad should have pulled out. How about that? There you go. I don't know what to tell you. It's silly to me. So I guess last little dip in here, then I'll let you be on your way because, time and things. What is disaster?
Oh, disaster. So it's kind of funny because I'm sort of easing off disaster recently.
I've noticed it's a little, but yeah.
So disaster is sort of a side passion project that I do plan on continuing to revisit every now and again. Like I had said that I was going to take a break, and then I released another episode anyway. But basically it covers natural disasters and unnatural disasters the way you would true crime, right? So you start out and I would talk about the origin of it the way you would like the origin of a killer or something, and then sort of what it did as far as the damage when it was initially occurring, and then the fallout and the victims of the natural disasters and unnatural disasters. The only problem with it, like as far as dedicating my time to it, is I did start to realize a portion of my audience just isn't as interested in natural disasters as I am. It has less universal appeal of true crime. And so whenever I dedicate time to disaster, unfortunately, that's time away from pleasing the entire audience versus like a third of the audience. And so I love it as an idea, but in practice, it is limiting.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, that sucks. I enjoy it, but I understand because you got to go where your bread's buttered. Makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. At the end of the day, you know, I am dependent on ads and Patreon support and things like that. In a perfect world, I can just create exactly the type of episodes I feel like making that week. But when it becomes your full-time job, it's both freeing and limiting, depending on the situation.
All in all, how long have you been doing this? You know,
Oh man. Well, there was a sort of false launch into 2016, and then a relaunch in the start of 2017. But you know, so I would say, what has it been? It's been like a little over 8 years, you know, so that's why I say going on a decade. So it's been a little over 8 years journey.
how long? How long? How long has it been your full-time job?
6 months into the second launch, I would say.
Really?
Yeah. And that's only because and because I've had people say like, "Oh, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to try to have a true crime podcast," and I'm like, "No, don't do that. Don't do that." I got very, very lucky, you know, and maybe it's not luck, but I just like to say lucky in terms of there wasn't a lot of other true crime podcasts, right? I got in that last window. I snuck in through the door before it exploded. And so I'll tell people, hey, yeah, like they'll ask me what I do, and I'm like, I have a true crime podcast, and they're like, one of those, and it's like, hey, you know, I was one of the first guys. You don't get to say that. But the thing is, now, if you were to create a true crime podcast, I mean, I swear we get more true crime podcast creators than listeners these days. You know, like it seems like every day there's 5 more coming out. And so, yeah, about 6 months in, actually, I was close to quitting because it was just taking up so much time. I got a Patreon. Somebody joined my Patreon, and she joined at like I want to say $650 a month. Told me that she wanted to consider it like an injection into the project.
Did you like send her a dick pic? Like, what the holy shit, dude?
No, she just really believed in the show. She liked the direction of it. I assume she had some level of wealth. What's kind of sad is like one day I realized she hadn't written me for some time, and I did some digging, found out that she had died of cancer. And so I'll always be extremely thankful to her because she was sort of like, she gave me like that second, well, even third wind because I was already on my second relaunch. And so she sort of gave me that third wind. And well, right after she had joined, that's around the time the Nick Stautzenberger episode released. That became viral. And then the rest is sort of history. So.
Jeez, man. I'm still looking for my first person to jump on there. We had oh my god, our first kind of like little start on it. We thought it, and it's like an infamous episode for us because we always, you know, think back to it. We thought that, you know, we were going to add a special episode just for Patreons, and no one got on it. We thought that it made sense, and we were going to charge people more than it cost to get a subscription for Disney Plus. And I'm like, no one knows who the fuck we are. What are we doing? What are we doing? We had this weird little kind of come to Jesus moment where being super green to the business, it was a funny little Patreon. I mean, there are like a few episodes on there, but they're like are after we got recording little chats, which is stupid in thought, but that's just crazy. I think that's just it just reminded me of the initial kind of growing pains of the channel. It's fun.
Yeah, and that's the thing about this industry is that podcasting is still in its infancy, and it might even get strangled in the crib. It's sort of a stopgap between radio and television and YouTube and things like that. It exists in this weird wild west.
Yeah.
And the financial stuff of it, I always warn people away about it. I believe, okay, here's an example, right? So
Okay.
people are always trying to sort of get their Patreon popping off. And I tell them, like, I know personally because I've spoken for Patreon and I've spoken with the staff. I'm in the top 1,000 earners on Patreon. But the thing is, I will tell you, that shows how dire the situation is.
He makes $4 a month, folks.
That I should not be in the top 1,000. That just shows that Patreon, like, there's like half a percentile of people making like money, and then the rest of us, we got to put in that like hard work to keep it going.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those. It's one of those things where you can't really expect, and that's kind of my mantra about this whole thing is I don't expect to make money for it right now. I'm a year in, right? I still enjoy it as much as I did when I first started. I'm still trying to improve things. If the money comes, fine. If it doesn't, I don't know, whatever. I'll just live by a van down by the river, I guess. I don't know. But it sounds like to me, man, and I knew this from the gate, so this is like a little whatever, but it's definitely a passion thing for you. Luckily, you get paid for your time, and damn well deserving of it, because even if you're not a big fan of true crime, just like the human condition part of it, you cover just masterfully. So I just appreciate what you do day in, day out, the sacrifices you make for your mental and emotional health, doing what you do, because this is not a Joe Schmo can do this. Like you got to be, I don't know, you got to have some shit to you to deal with what you deal with and do what you do. So just keep on keeping on, man. I just appreciate you taking the time out. Appreciate the content. Just
Yeah, man, and I appreciate you having me on the show, and that you listen and seem to really have a grasp of what I'm trying to do with the show, because that can be harder to come by than you realize.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to definitely get you on too. Not only was I super excited to talk to you, so I'm like, it's like a celebrity and shit. This is fun. But I really wanted to kind of dig in, because I have talked to a few other true crime people, and it's just kind of like, okay. I mean, it's kind of, I wouldn't say it's phoned in, but it's just like, well, kind of name that tune with what you're going to answer. I knew you were going to be a different breed, and I really wanted to kind of, hear for myself and let the other people listening hear that as well, to say, hey, here's the man behind the mask.
Well, yeah, I appreciate it. And hey, if you want to have me on down the line, I wouldn't mind coming on the podcast again someday.
Oh, you don't have an option. I was going to drag you kicking and screaming there, Brenda. Okay, there we are. I'm stupid and bad at my job. I hit a button.
Dude, it's all good. I figured something happened with the disconnection.
Yep. I'm just stupid and bad at what I do. The wife put a message in the chat for some reason, and I don't know what it was. Thank you, wife, for doing whatever that was. I love her forever. Yeah, you don't have a choice. I was gonna get you kicking and screaming. Absolutely. I just want to thank you again. Where can we find you? Let's kind of, well, you're already on. Yeah, where can they find you? Because you are on my channel anyway, on the website. So
yeah, no, just any podcast app you use beyond YouTube, except for YouTube. I don't have all the episodes on there. But pretty much any podcast app not named YouTube, if you just type in Obscura and True Crime, you can find me.
Beautiful. Apparently, my name is Tiffany Dow right now. What is happening in my life? Okay, there we go. And I have him. I have Obscura, the channel on the actual website. So the website's a little on the little ticker there. He's under friends of the show. So if you want to hear, kind of in a text format, what he's about, go there. It'll take you to the website, and you'll be able to see all of the links and what have you there. So, Justin, my man, I appreciate you so much. I feel like she's going to watch that too. I don't. All right. Okay. I'm just getting. Oh, okay. So, sister-in-law looks like they're going to start watching. There we go. See, look at that. Me getting you subscribers and shit. I am a marketing genius. But oh yeah, you know what? She did actually ask me a question. There was some crazy shit that happened in Indiana. An episode, I don't know if it was an episode or not, but some kind of crazy. She may know a little bit more, but she was she wanted me to mention that. I vaguely remember you covering some wild shit in Indiana, but I don't know exactly what.
Are you talking about Down the Hill?
Oh, is it Delphi murders?
Yeah, I actually went. I went and visited the area. Delphi.
Oh, really?
Yeah, when I was living in Indiana. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Because I don't remember. It sounded familiar, but I'm assuming there's an episode there. Yeah.
Well, there was one planned, but the trial and everything is moving at an absolute crawl. I was living in Indiana at the time. Actually, now I'm in upstate New York. But
nice.
Yeah, but at the time I was in Indiana, so I went and I actually visited Delphi, and had a very strange vibe with pictures of the guy and everything all over the buildings and everything. But the case itself, I mean, it is moving at a snail's crawl. So who knows when that'll actually be covered. Yeah, there's been some controversy as far as releasing information. The judge has been pretty stiff about that stuff getting out, and I think that Indiana isn't really used to sort of all the national attention that it's getting.
That's where the sister-in-law lives at. You're saying it's a scary town.
Yeah, I went to the bridge. I actually went to the bridge. I took some pictures, posted on social media, and I went to I think it was either a CVS or a Walgreens. I went to the CVS and Walgreens and tried to get a feel of the place. And one day when the case is, kind of finished up or whatever, I would like to cover that case. And I'm sure a bunch of other people will. But having been within such close proximity, I mean, it was only like an hour's drive or something.
I don't know, man. You're kind of that magic man. It's one of those things you've become, at least in my eyes, like the go-to guy for that stuff. So it's like everything else is a bit lowbrow to me.
I appreciate it, man.
All right. Well, this time I promise I really do say. I think we'll say goodbye. I mean that probably not, but I'll try. Sincerely, keep in touch, man. Thank you so much for the time. I did not mean to keep you for an hour and a half, and I absolutely meant to keep you an hour and a half. That's fine. But yeah, thanks a lot, man.
All righty, man. I appreciate being on, and you have a great day.
Hey, you too.